The ruins of Vera, 7 stretched into the distance, skeletal remains of a once thriving colony. Cracked ferrocrete structures loomed like broken teeth under the dim glow of a dying sun, their surfaces scorched from orbital bombardment. Smoke hung low, curling through shattered streets where the Draskari occupation force moved with calculated precision. From his concealed position atop a collapsed manufacturing hub, Captain Elias Rourke lay prone, his rifle cradled against his shoulder. His breath was measured, heart rate slow, the product of years spent mastering the art of patience. The XM-50 Longspear, a sniper rifle engineered for atmospheric drift and variable gravity, rested against his cheek, its targeting system dormant. Rourke never relied on computers. Numbers lived in his head, calculations instinctive. To his right, nestled within the shadows of a partially collapsed support beam, Sergeant Dane Voss adjusted his scope, eyes locked on the Draskari below. Unlike Rourke, he preferred his rifle's hollow sight overlay, a quiet concession to modernity. They had been in position for nearly 12 hours, unmoving, blending into the environment as the enemy expanded their patrols. 4-man recon squad, Voss murmured, voice barely a breath. Draskari infantry, standard plasma rigs. Movements too tight for a routine sweep. Rourke shifted the rifle's angle, his scope locking onto the lead figure. Commander Koresh, identifiable by the jagged, onyx-colored exoskeletal plating marking him as an officer. The Draskari's compound eyes gleamed cold, sweeping the area with practiced scrutiny. They expected snipers. Good. They don't trust their position, Rourke noted. But they don't respect ours, either. Voss exhaled sharply, his version of a laugh. They don't think we're a threat. Not after the last 2 misses. 2 hours earlier, Rourke had fired a shot that had whipped past Koresh's head, embedding itself in a concrete barricade. A near miss. Or so the Draskari thought. In truth, it had been a deliberate shot. One calculated to test the wind, adjust for gravitational inconsistencies, and most importantly, gauge enemy reaction. The Draskari, with their reliance on plasma-guided weaponry, viewed projectile-based combat as crude and imprecise. That mistake would cost them. Koresh motioned to his squad, his segmented mandibles clicking as he relayed silent orders. The Draskari fanned out, weapons raised, but their stance was relaxed, assured. Humans were no threat from this distance. Not with their archaic rifles. Rourke tightened his grip on the Longspear's trigger, adjusting for elevation. He could end Koresh now, one clean shot. But that wasn't the plan. He fired. The bullet hissed through the air, striking the edge of a burnout cargo hauler 2 meters from Koresh's position. The commander flinched, his warriors tensing before realizing, again, that they were unharmed. Rourke watched as the Draskari visibly relaxed, their grips loosening, their scanning motions losing urgency. They believed the human sniper teams were ineffective. Perfect. Koresh's mandibles curled in what could only be amusement. He gestured lazily toward a sniper nest they had already cleared, ordering his men forward. The Draskari had stopped treating this as a battlefield. They thought they were in control. Voss shifted beside him. They'll start breaking cover soon. They think we're just a nuisance. That's what we want. Rourke eased back from his scope. One more shot, then we relocate. Let them feel comfortable. Voss nodded, adjusting his sightline. I'll take this one. A moment later, his rifle cracked. The bullet whistled past another soldier's head, embedding harmlessly in a distant, rusted-out transport unit. The Draskari flinched, but only for a moment. Then Koresh barked something in his guttural, insectoid dialect, and the tension broke. Laughter, actual unguarded amusement, rippled through the squad. The mighty human snipers, feared across the stars, couldn't land a shot. Rourke smirked. They're playing right into it. Voss exhaled, shifting his position. Time to move. They backed away from their perch, slipping through the wreckage with silent efficiency. Every movement was practiced, years of battlefield conditioning reducing their presence to nothing more than shifting shadows. As they relocated, the comms crackled, a low-frequency whisper from their handler back at the command post. "Sitrep." Rourke keyed his mic, targets taking the bait. "Enemy underestimates long-range effectiveness. They've stopped treating sniper positions as a threat." A brief pause. Then, proceed as planned. Final shot window, 0400. Voss checked his watch. "That gives us 6 hours to make sure they never see it coming." Rourke nodded, eyes scanning the terrain. They weren't just hunting. They were orchestrating a narrative, controlling the enemy's perception of human warfare. By the time the Draskari realized the mistake, it would be too late. The ruins of Vera 7 were quieter now. The night air carried only the distant hum of Draskari patrol ships passing overhead, their searchlights sweeping the dead city. But the enemy wasn't looking for snipers anymore. They thought they had already measured the threat, categorized it, dismissed it. That was their first mistake. Captain Elias Rourke watched from a new vantage point, perched within the remains of an administrative tower, its upper floors sheared away by orbital bombardment. His rifle rested on a cracked window ledge, its matte finish blending seamlessly into the surrounding debris. Below, the Draskari commander, Koresh, moved confidently through the rubble-strewn streets, his squad spread out with relaxed, almost casual movements. Sergeant Dane Voss lay beside him, eyes fixed on his scope. "They're baiting us now," he murmured. Rourke could see it too. The Draskari weren't just patrolling. They were positioning themselves to be shot at. A few lingered in open sight lines. Others deliberately hesitated in kill zones. It was an ambush, but one designed for an enemy they didn't truly understand. "They think we're predictable," Rourke muttered. "They think we'll take the easy shot." Voss exhaled slowly. "So we give them something better." Rourke adjusted his rifle, carefully calibrating for the wind patterns and atmospheric density. Every previous shot, every so-called miss, had been intentional data collection, mapping bullet trajectories under Vera 7's weaker gravity, adjusting for the microcurrents that twisted through the ruined cityscape. The Draskari thought human marksmanship was primitive. They had no idea they had been feeding the snipers everything they needed. Koresh stopped near the wreckage of a transport hauler, gesturing to his men. They clustered near him, false confidence in every movement. "They're stacking up for the push," Voss noted. "They think they've cornered us." Rourke allowed himself the hint of a smirk. "Then let's prove them wrong." He inhaled, fingers tightening on the long spear's trigger assembly. His heartbeat slowed. The world shrank down to distances, angles, and the inevitability of the shot. He fired. The hypersonic round cut through the air like a whispered death knell. The Draskari barely had time to register the sound before the bullet punched through Koresh's skull, exiting in a mist of shattered carapace and alien ichor. The elite warrior of the Draskari collapsed mid-stride, momentum carrying his body face first into the dirt. Silence, then chaos. The squad erupted into frantic movement, their careful formations disintegrating in an instant. The controlled confidence was gone, replaced with the instinctive panic of soldiers who had just lost their leader. Voss took his shot. Another Draskari officer crumpled. His chest cavity burst open from the force of the impact. The enemy whirled blindly, weapons raised, but they had no target. Only death striking from an unseen specter in the dark. "They're breaking," Voss murmured. Rourke watched as the Draskari scattered, discipline shattered. Some tried to rally behind a damaged troop carrier, but they hesitated, unsure where the next shot would come from. That was the power of a sniper. The kill was never just about the body that fell. It was about what it did to the ones left standing. "We need to move," Rourke said, already packing his rifle. "They'll call in reinforcements." Voss nodded, shifting back from his position. Below them, the Draskari were shouting into their comms, their formations falling apart with every passing second. They had thought they were the hunters. They had just learned otherwise. The Draskari warband was in full retreat. Through the magnification of his scope, Captain Elias Rourke watched as the enemy scrambled for cover, their disciplined formations shattered. Plasma rifles swung wildly, warriors firing at shadows, their mandibles clicking in frantic, guttural panic. They still had no idea where the shots had come from. Sergeant Dane Voss, prone beside him in the ruined administrative tower, gave a slow, satisfied exhale. They're falling apart. Rourke didn't respond immediately. His eye remained trained on the chaos below, watching, analyzing. He had seen battlefield collapses before, but this was different. This wasn't just a loss of a leader. This was a loss of confidence. "They don't know how to fight an enemy they can't see," Rourke murmured. "They thought they could bait us. That was their second mistake. The first was underestimating human snipers at all." Down in the ruins, one of the remaining Draskari officers, his exoskeletal plating marked with the insignia of a field lieutenant, barked out a desperate order. Warriors hesitated, then slowly began to regroup. They were trying to form a defensive perimeter, trying to regain control. Rourke adjusted his sightline. Not happening. The long spear rifle kicked against his shoulder. The round flew true, cracking through the officer's neck, severing his upper spinal column. His body hit the dirt, his warriors immediately scattering. "Now they break," Voss said. Rourke watched the Draskari soldiers abandon formation entirely, their retreat turning into a disorderly rout. Some fled toward the ruins, disappearing into the wreckage like frightened animals. Others signaled for emergency extraction, their shrieking calls echoing across the deserted colony. "They're going to pull out," Rourke said. "Command's going to want confirmation." Voss tapped his earpiece, switching to low-frequency transmission. "Overwatch, this is Shadow Team. Draskari forces are in full retreat. Target neutralization was successful. Repeat, enemy leadership has been eliminated." A brief pause. Then the calm, measured voice of their handler crackled through the line. "Copy, Shadow Team. Confirm enemy collapse. Sit tight for extraction. Out." Voss rolled onto his back, letting out a breath. "That's it then." Rourke lowered his rifle, scanning the battlefield one last time. The enemy wasn't regrouping. They were running. And once the Draskari ran, they didn't stop. They would take this failure back to their command structure, and the fear would spread. Because they hadn't just lost their leader. They had lost a ghost. Voss sat up, cracking his knuckles. "Think they'll come back?" Rourke allowed himself the faintest of smiles. Not for a long time. A distant rumble filled the air, a sound like rolling thunder, but deeper. He glanced up. The sky above Vera 7 was shifting, shadows moving against the stars. The human fleet had arrived. He tapped his comm, Shadow Team to command. "Looks like you'll be mopping up sooner than expected." The fleet had waited for this moment. The precise instant enemy morale shattered. Now, they would strike, and the Draskari would never recover. Voss stood, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "They'll ask us what happened here." Rourke followed suit, stepping away from the ledge. "Let them wonder."